Good evening and welcome to EWTN's continuing live coverage of the Synod on the Family. We are still in week one, which is dedicated to reflecting on the challenges that are facing families at the present moment all over the world. Today, the bishops continued their work in their small groups, and in the news, that equals a slow news day, which can lead to a little bit of gossip in the press, shall we say. So we want to shed light on some of the topics that came up today during the Synod discussions. And to do that, I would like to welcome on the set Alejandro Bermudez, who is the executive director at Achi Prensa, the world's largest Catholic news agency in Spanish. And he's the executive director of Catholic News Agency. And I have been, can wait to have him on the program. So Alejandro, welcome.
Thank you, Mary. It's great to be with you here.
Few people know more about this than you, and I really wanted to have you on to give us what we call a bird's eye view of what's going on in the Synod. Some people may be tuning in for the very first time for our Synod coverage. So just in general, what's happening, what's taking place in Rome during these weeks?
Okay, let me start from the very beginning, which is Synod comes from the Greek word synodos, which means walking together. So the whole idea of Synod is to bring synodal fathers, the way they are called formally, to from all different walks of life in the Catholic Church, from all parts of the world, from all different cultures, all different languages, to be together here and tackle one specific issue that has been chosen by the Holy Father because of its importance.
Right.
In this specific synod, the Holy Father has decided that 2 synods in a row, an extraordinary synod a year ago, and now this ordinary synod, both of them be focused on the family and the importance of the family.
Why do you think that is? I mean, we've had synods on the Eucharist, on various different things. Now, like you said, this is the second one, the extraordinary one, now the ordinary one. What do you think Pope Francis sees in the world that made him want to have this synod?
That's a great question. I think he kind of answered that question when he was in Philadelphia for the World Meeting of Families, and when he said that the destiny and the future of the Church is tied to the future and the destiny of the family. I think those are pretty strong words, because it basically points out that why we have to procure a pastoral answer that seeks to secure the future of the family in the Church and in the world, not only in the Church, because as we know, the family is also the key cell for every society.
We're all born into a family. So what's happening here is that the bishops have come from every corner of the globe. They get together, the Holy Father opened the debate, and then they're doing now this week what we call the small circle discussions. What happens during those things?
Well, this is a special synod in the sense that for the desire of the Holy Father, the responsible for the synod, which is Cardinal Baldisseri, has decided that the dynamic of this synod will be a little bit different. Okay. So let's explain first what is the usual way in which a synod works. So at the beginning, all those who have been invited to the synod, all those who have been chosen by their own bishops' conferences that are participating at the synod, they go for about a week and a half talking, usually between 4 to 5 minutes each. It's a long process in which each one of the participants speak of whatever they believe is more important.
Okay.
There is no specific order in that.
Okay.
And then the next other week and a half, because each synod takes about 3 weeks, each ordinary synod takes about 3 weeks. Then in the second part, there is this small group, and these small groups are the ones in which in each specific language, each one of the groups work and discuss and bring up specific conclusions related to that language group.
Okay, so they're broken up by languages, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're from the same countries, right?
Oh, no.
If you speak English, you could be from, Australia, England, India, any place in the world. So it's kind of multicultural, even though it's language-based.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The French has bishops from Africa, from Burkina Faso, Canada, France. So yes, each one of the group languages is definitely a small slice of the universal church in itself.
Now, I find that the language groups tend to stick together, if you will. Like the African bishops had a meeting yesterday, for example, to really decide what their message was going to be for the Synod. And we've noticed that among other German bishops and the Polish bishops. The Pope warned against lobbying. Now, do you think that, are there any groups lobbying inside according to language, or maybe some groups that may have an agenda? Do you think that's happening?
I think that's a great question, and I think it depends on how you take the concept of lobbying.
Okay.
If we take basically a political sense of lobbying in which there is a lot of self-interest involved, and I think that is very rare. What I would say that there is a small, probably half a dozen of bishops from Central European countries that they are totally convinced that they need to bring one scalp back to their countries, which is a vision of the church and a vision of the family that is a little bit more attuned with their secular cultures. They need that somehow there has to be some kind of concessions from the church to the secular culture. And they have already, between the 72 speeches that have already been given of 3 minutes each, there have been about 5 of them that have been very, very focused on that, on changing the practice of communion to the divorcing new unions, or a different kind of language that makes homosexuality somehow more acceptable. Or
and these are Western, these are problems facing families all over the world and people all over the world. The language part gets tricky because as the Synod Fathers have mentioned, we want to be more pastoral. Of course, we're all God's children, but when you take the language back down to the local level, or you may translate it down from the Italian, some confusion might arise from that.
Yes, absolutely. And it goes back to the concept of the group, as you were saying. If you understand lobbying just as simple groups that have specific ideas, as you were saying yesterday, the African bishops got together, and they got together in a meeting in which they wanted the press to know that they were getting together, but they did not allow the press to go inside the meeting. So it was kind of funny because it's pretty unusual.
But that doesn't usually happen. You're right.
Exactly. But I think the message that they wanted to convey is, listen, we are gathering together. We want to unify our message. We have an idea as a group, and this is not being in secret. It was.
And we'll see the results from the Synod. Maybe as the Synod progresses, kind of the African message, what they discuss there behind closed doors. I have to say, some of us journalists were inside, and we got to say hello to them quickly before they started the meeting. And I even tweeted. I said, the joy and the unity of the African bishops is something I think this Synod really needs. I mean, I think they bring such great joy and clarity, and there's a real future for the Catholic Church there in Africa.
Absolutely. And for that purpose, each group, in this case the African group, represents a group that presents a set of pastoral priorities, pastoral concerns, and so forth. And as Archbishop Charles Chaput from Philadelphia said yesterday during the press conference, I have not been at a meeting in which there are now no groups that try to present some specific ideas.
That's wonderful.
The idea of a totally a heavenly meeting in which we're all angels without any priorities, that's not very realistic.
Well, the church is human and divine, and the human has to get down into the nitty-gritty to solve these problems, and to do that, they have to have open discussions. A lot of people, I think, after the last Synod, were thinking we might be heading towards changes in church doctrine. But I wanted to point out, Cardinal Vantois, who is the Archbishop of Paris, on the very first day said, if you think you will find a radical change in church doctrine from this Synod, you'll be disappointed. So how do you see the Vatican's approach to delivering its message this time around? I think they may have obviously sensed the confusion that the last Synod created, and Cardinal Vantois wanted to come out and say, if you're expecting changes in these areas, don't. I mean, do you think they're presenting it better, the Vatican?
I think they do, and I see it in two, like Cardinal Erdo, Peter Erdo, for example, is a cardinal that opened the discussion with what is called the relatio pre-dissertationem. And a lot of bishops have been saying, you and I have been hearing this quite frequently, that a lot of bishops have found a significant guiding material for their group discussions in what Cardinal Erdo has said.
And many have wanted it to be included as part of their official documents, right? The Instrumentum Laboris. What is that discussion still going on? Are they still advocating this?
Yes, that happened today at the press office. There were several questions about bishops being so interested in Cardinal Erdo that they were requesting his speech in their own language.
Right.
We know that the English group has organized themselves sufficiently, so they already have a translation. But the Spanish-speaking want also Cardinal Erdo's speech translated into Spanish. And the interesting thing is that Cardinal Erdo made a very, very clear clarification about the nature of a synod. We're not here to debate doctrine here.
Right.
That's not the nature of the synod. That's not what bishops should do. We're here to reaffirm doctrine and see how that doctrine can inspire us to new pastoral ways to respond to the challenges that families are confronting all over the world.
You brought up Archbishop Chaput of Philadelphia before. He said during the press conference that some of the Synod Fathers feel in this Instrumentum Laboris, which is the working document for the Synod, that the problems that were brought out facing families were mostly Western problems and overlooked problems faced by other families around the world, like for divorced and remarrieds and so on, that maybe this isn't the pressing issue in other areas of the globe. Would you agree with that? I mean, what do you think about this Instrumentum Laboris not representing the universal church, as some Synod Fathers are saying?
Well, I can tell you from the perspective of Latin America, Mary, I can tell you the families confront far more pressing problems than a communion to the divorce who are in a new union. Definitely the far more problems, and they would like to see that taking more center stage, the discussion. As you said, a lot of that discussion is centered in issues that are Central European, and too related to the West. If you consider the challenges that poverty places into families in Latin America, the problem of poverty to make sure that you can put together a family, to put together the family, that you can start a family, that you can raise a family. Those are pretty pressing questions.
And very important to Pope Francis as well. And I think last year, some of the issues dominated the headlines. That's partly the media's fault. So hopefully the Synod Fathers will help get that message out there that there are other problems, as you mentioned, facing families, pressing problems that we hope can improve the quality of family life. Alejandro, thank you so much for being on. You can catch him covering all of the Synod in Spanish. He is handling all of the Spanish coverage for EWTN, so tune in for that as well. You don't want to miss a beat. We have to take a break, but stay tuned for more live Synod coverage from Rome. Welcome back to EWTN's continuing coverage of the Synod on the Family. I have the pleasure to welcome to the set now Father Robert Gall, who is an Associate Professor of Ethics at Rome's Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, of which I am proudly an alumna. So welcome, Father. Thank you for being with us.
It's great to be with you, Mary.
Good to see. It's been a while. Looking at the Pope's words, he said that the Synod is not a parliament. He opened with that very strongly. Some are saying it's implicitly responding to a book that implied that the Synod last year was rigged somehow. What did you make of his remarks, given that he opened the Synod with this idea?
Right, the Holy Fathers notice that there's tension among the Synod Fathers. There's a tension which almost looks like a lobbying effort, that there's two blocks within the Synod pushing in two different directions. And there's also outside groups trying to influence what's going on inside the Synod Hall. And Pope Francis wanted to make sure that it's properly understood by the Synod Fathers exactly what a Synod is and it's a it's a consultative body. It's not a deliberative body.
Okay.
So it's not a parliament that they reach through negotiation and compromise some kind of new legislation. Instead, what they do is they give counsel to the Holy Father so that the Holy Father can come to a decision, can come up with a document concluding the synod. So it's really an adjustment of what's going on inside the hall. At the same time, it's an assurance that he's a principle of unity, and he's also a principle of continuity with the tradition. He represents St. Peter. So even though that there's a battle going on within the synod hall, he's there he's encouraging them at once to have that confidence in the faith, and he's saying, but this isn't all about compromise and negotiations, it's about being faithful to Jesus Christ.
And not politicized. This isn't about politics, and I'm glad he brought that up, because I think sometimes on the outside, maybe media coverage or even just normal bystanders, we can think, oh, it's a political battle, it's all about politics, but really it is about faith. It's about Christ's teaching, and here are his modern day apostles gathering around the Vicar of Christ, trying to address a problem facing the universal church. That's what it is for Catholics. If everyone else wants to politicize it, they can, but it's not about that.
So long as we're all together with the tradition, the disagreements and the differences also in cultural background, in pastoral perspectives, can really be an enhancement for the church's creativity. Because what the Holy Father has asked is that the Synod Fathers have this courage to be enlightened by the Holy Spirit, to come up with creative initiatives for how to make the family really holy, to how to encourage marital vocation, so that people, husbands and wives, really understand their marriage as a call to holiness.
That's what it is. It is truly a vocation, and the family is under attack. You're a professor of ethics, and so much of that is involved in moral theology and the family. What do you see are the main problems facing the family? Because he's encouraging people, to get married. First of all, we have a lot of couples that are cohabitating, or, he says, don't have the courage, to get married, respond to that vocation. What other problems do you see kind of facing the family at the moment?
Well, in the United States, even since all of this has been radicalized by the Supreme Court decision last June, that marriage is totally disassembled, and that it has to do, of course, with gender ideology. So what Pope Francis is encouraging is that we recognize that human beings are men and women, and that men and women are open to enduring love that's open to giving life. And therefore, the family, as you say, it's under attack. It's being challenged by society, by the world, and also within the church. There's disagreements about what the family should be. So this is an
opportunity. Hopefully they're working that out.
It's an opportunity for Pope Francis to form the bishops in unity around what the faith says regarding the family.
There's been some talk of conspiracy, a hermeneutic, if you will, of conspiracy. There seemed to have been ambivalence in some of the topics that were being discussed by the Synod Fathers. Do you think that the Holy Father was aware of that? Maybe not the first time, but maybe now this time? Or?
Well, it seems like from the news that's come out of the Synod Hall, the Holy Father himself used that term, a hermeneutic of conspiracy, to condemn it. Good. And it's interesting because we also see here a link with Pope Benedict XVI, because Pope Benedict spoke of the need for a hermeneutic of continuity. And so surely what Pope Francis meant is that we need to set aside any kind of hermeneutic of conspiracy, where the Synod Fathers might be afraid that other Synod Fathers are trying to get some result and therefore try to stymie them with their own words. Instead, they should be acting constructively in coherence with the tradition. So just as Pope Benedict spoke of the hermeneutic of continuity as opposed to a hermeneutic of rupture. So now Pope Francis has developed Pope Benedict's teaching about the hermeneutic of continuity to add this rejection, not just of rupture, but also of conspiracy.
I wanted to bring up one of the main issues last year, and of course this year, a topic that will be addressed, is communion for people who are divorced and have gotten remarried without getting an annulment. You brought up in an article I read last year, you called this a Trojan horse. Can you explain what you meant by that, this question of the divorce and remarriage and communion for them?
Right, the expression I use about Trojan horse, it was a reference to the working document for this current synod that includes these paragraphs that are ambivalent. It says some of the Synod Fathers have proposed this solution, others have proposed this other solution. And some of the solutions that were alluded to in the working document are solutions that are based on a subjectivistic principle, according that don't really look at the reality of the issue. And so it's really crucial, and Pope Francis has helped to address this with the new adjustment in canon law, to the new motu proprio, regarding the declaration of marriage annulment, that he's facilitated a really pastoral approach to marriage annulment, which is determining the truth of the matter regarding one's status in whether they're married or not. But regarding this this risk of the Trojan horse, the risk of the Trojan horse would be these proposals that some of the Synod Fathers have brought in, which is to say that so long as you make some penance, and
Yeah.
they speak about a path of penance, that then you can receive Holy Communion. But of course, the church has always taught is that penance entails conversion.
Yes,
And conversion
yes.
is always a recognition of what your sin
that
was.
you've sinned.
Yes.
Yes, and I know the Jubilee of Mercy that's coming up. You have to know that you're a sinner and that you need mercy. So I see what you're saying. Do you see any other Trojan horses this year? We're only in week one, but there already are some fireworks. Do you see any other kind of what you would say a Trojan horse this year that could be tricky?
Well, actually, same-sex attraction is also an issue that presents a lot of controversy. And there, too, there's the necessity to say that all Christians, all of us, are called to live holy purity. We're called to live chastity,
Yes.
to live according to our vocation. And there, too, we need to welcome people, encounter them, and help them. And this is true of all of us, that we're all challenged to live holy purity. And this is true of people who experience same-sex attraction, and it's true of people who are suffering with difficulties in their marriage. It's true of the engaged couples who are preparing for marriage, that they're all challenged to live holy purity.
That's the thing, and I think the church says you can say maybe you are attracted to the same sex, but you just can't act on it. Just as a single heterosexual person can't act on it unless you're married. But they, of course, they could never act on it, and they have to choose to live a life of chastity with that orientation. And so I think, don't you think that they're coming up with pastoral? They're not having an openness to this lifestyle. They're coming up with pastoral approaches on how to be, I think, as Pope Francis would say, welcoming to them as people, and hopefully through that maybe lead them to conversion.
Well, the sacraments are really powerful. Prayer is really powerful. So to invite these people to come back to church, to come back to the sacraments, to use the sacrament of confession so that they can receive the grace of conversion, and to recognize any difficulties they've had in the past, and to face that so that they can experience God's forgiveness. God's forgiveness is unlimited and it's infinite, but it's based on the recognition that we're sinful, so that His grace can heal us when we recognize the sinfulness and the disorder.
Do you think that they're talking enough about the moral issues involved in marital life? I don't hear a lot of that coming out. I don't hear a lot coming out anyway. They're having these closed door discussion, but in what I've heard so far, I haven't heard much about the morality involved in Christian marriage.
Yes, many of the conversations we had at the Synod, there seems to be a kind of allergy to the term morality.
Right.
And an allergy because in a lot of Catholic theology, there's this idea that morality means rules, norms, prohibitions.
Church is saying no, no, no all the time. Yeah.
This is all unfortunate, because what Christian morality is really about, it's about happiness, it's about joy, it's about the virtues, it's about love, and it's about freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom from being freed from the enslavement of sin and from passion. And this is what the church offers. But this requires also living according to certain norms that help us. They're an assistance so that we can avoid the pitfalls of our own passions, of our own tendency towards sin that we experience in our bodies, in our souls, our tendency towards pride. And so morality should be seen as something positive and an offering of love and freedom.
I think one of the things that they're addressing that I saw, I studied moral theology, that I also witnessed is this greater need for better marriage preparation. Everyone kind of complains that the church is granting these so-called easy divorces now. Well, the couples that got married and are asking for an annulment maybe shouldn't have gotten married in the first place, because they didn't really, honestly, did they really know? Usually they're living together already, they're already contracepting, so were they really ready to form a true Christian marriage in the Catholic Church's understanding of it? Well, maybe then that's why they get the annulment. So do you think better marriage prep is something that they're going to be talking about and something urgently needed?
I'm sure this is one of the priority issues. It's certainly true in Europe, where people can be culturally Catholic, where they want to be married in church, but they don't even realize that it's a sacrament, that it's a vocation, it's a call to holiness.
They just want to get married for the pictures sometimes in the church. I don't know. Yeah.
Unfortunately, some couples, as they're preparing for marriage, the priority issues are the banquet, the flowers, the photographs.
Sure.
Whereas, fortunately, it's a real blessing that there are couples today who recognize what really counts is the prayer and the discernment regarding that this is a vocation to be married, and it's also a vocation of discernment as to who one's spouse is, because once you're married, one should recognize that my husband or my wife is my path to holiness, my path to Jesus Christ. And when a couple, it's really beautiful to see it, when a young couple discern this in prayer and they prepare their whole family too, is helping them to discern, and they prepare in prayer. I was recently involved in the marriage preparation of a couple that had adoration of the Blessed Sacrament for their whole family and their whole wedding party the night before.
Wow.
And the incidental issues about flowers and the banquet and the music, and so this all faded in the background because all about the marriage itself, their commitment and love to one another.
In Christ. And I think that's just, hopefully we're going to continue to build up these Christian families throughout the world that are struggling, and hopefully that will be one of the outcomes of this synod. That's our show for today. Father Gall, thank you so much for joining us on the set. And remember, for the latest on the synod, check out our special synod page on EWTN.com. Follow us on Twitter at EWTN, and send us your questions and comments using the hashtag EWTN Synod. We want to hear from you. And as always, for more information about EWTN TV, radio, our Facebook page, and our app, visit EWTN.com. We'll be back tomorrow night with our continuing synod coverage. I'm Mary Shovelin. Good night from Rome.